2009, a group of teenagers, myself included, travelled to the Gambia along with a youth worker to spend a week volunteering. A year later we met up again, much closer to home, at a youth centre at Windermere in the Lake District, to reminisce and sift through the footage. It's hoped that our film will encourage other young people to volunteer in a similar capacity, and also promote the charity we worked with. I think it's important to point out that none of us were specially qualified in any way. We are all just normal teenagers. Lee Bell was the youngest of us at 16 and was in the middle of a catering course at college, which he's just finished. Taylor Wilson, 17, was doing music at the same college and has also just finished. Ewan Dyer was the oldest, and probably the most prepared, as he had been travelling a couple of times before. He was then on his gap year and is now preparing for his second year at Staffordshire University, doing a media course. Andy Murray, not the tennis player, was the youth worker assigned to look after us on the trip.
I hate my job.
Though instantly assimilated himself as part of a group rather than the responsible adult. And finally there's me, Ned Sharp, 17 at the time and studying for A-levels, which I've just completed. With the obvious exception of Andy, we were all at school together, but only really came together as a group through Grange Youth Club. It was with the Youth Club and Young Cumbria that we became involved in the Duke of Edinburgh Awards scheme, and we'd been working through the bronze and silver stages for a couple of years.
We eventually found a company called WYCE, which stands for Wundia's Centre of Excellence, which ran a village called Madina Salaam in the Gambia.
By 2009 we'd reached the gold level, and at this stage are required to do a week-long residential, whereby participants must spend a week away from home around people they don't know. The idea of spending some time doing charity work in a third world country for this at first seemed a little far-fetched, but the more we discussed it, the more enthusiastic we became, and as we already knew Andy from an earlier expedition, he was an ideal candidate to join us. We then had to find the funds for the trip, as none of us could afford something like this. We were lucky enough to find the Youth Opportunities Fund, who were willing to provide us with the necessary money, and are keen to support any young people with big ideas but lacking the funds to fulfil them.
Yeah, well, I guess my first reactions when we got there was I was just amazed really at the at just all the kids running across the street and how different it was from where we lived. It was like we were on a different world really.
At Banjul Airport we were greeted by WYCE staff in the arrivals hall and received a very necessary bottle of ice cold water.
Everyone is welcome in Gambia, especially in Madina Salaam.
They showed us to their custom painted Land Rover and then on to Madina Salaam, the village in which they operated. The hour-long drive to Madina Salaam let us see the sort of environment in which we would be living for the next few days, though from the inside of a Land Rover it still seemed distant. We talked very little, mainly because there was so much to take in, but also because some of what we saw was very surreal when witnessed from the perspective of a Western European with no real experience in a less economically developed country. Children as young as 7 carrying machetes, herds of cows wandering down the main road, large timber trucks packed with passengers on the logs. Safe to say we were mesmerised.
We used these little cameras when we were out there to film everything that we saw. They're fantastic little things because you can basically walk around with them just completely strapped to your hand all the time, and they're not heavy at all. They take great footage. The sound quality on them is not the best, but they're great little things. 200 quid each I think they cost. And Young Cumbria got them through the Boom film project. So yeah, really handy. The sort of policy that we had was we were going to film everything we possibly could. And between the airport and the compound, the Jeep broke down. So as part of the film, I thought, yeah, obviously we'll include that in the film. So we were filming the Jeep broken down, And I wasn't aware of doing it, but I must have pointed the camera in the direction of a policeman who was standing, I don't know, 100 yards away, and he came shouting across, running across to us, shouting, and basically gave us a real telling off for filming him, which we weren't doing intentionally, but he wouldn't. I thought at one point he was going to confiscate the cameras, which would have been a disaster, but we kind of persuaded him that we deleted the footage that he was in, and he let us go. But it was a bit of a kind of culture shock that moment, really. So we were a bit more careful from then on in, I think.
It's really surreal. You sort of don't really feel like you're here. You feel like it's all sort of like a big backdrop, and it's all going to drop down any second, and everyone from Grange is going to jump out and say, oh, it's all been a big joke. But it's very nice. I'm really enjoying it so far.
Well, that's morning. Just had a nice night's sleep. I think it's about 7 o'clock. Been woken up by all the noises. I can hear everybody going about. Got in quite late last night, so we were all quite tired. But it's an amazing place so far. We're just going to have a big introduction today. We're going to get shown around the village. And yeah, it's going to be good, I think, really. Looking forward to the rest of the week. The lads seem quite excited as well. It was all quite surreal last night arriving here. I mean, it is very different to where we came from, that's for sure.
It's customary for all volunteers at WYCE to spend their first day being shown around the village of Madina Salaam, and then the various projects being developed under WYCE's direction. It's an incredible experience which left us feeling much more at ease in our alien surroundings. One thing that became instantly clear was that things were different in Madina Salaam to what we had already experienced in Gambia, and much of this is down to WYCE. We were taken to see the beekeeping facilities WYCE created, the hutches built and locals trained in beekeeping by the volunteers, the woodlot planted on each year by volunteers to protect important plants, the sewing workshop which employs and trains local women, and most importantly, the school.
First of all, I would also like to welcome all of you.
And attached to the school is a medical centre that WYCE provided.
And you can look here, that's the ambulance WYCE provide for the villagers. That's why villagers are proud of WYCE.
The various projects employed many local people, and control of them is left in the hands of the locals as far as is possible, making for truly sustainable development. WYCE is not a charity that merely hands out vital life necessities to those who need them, but instead does so in a way that addresses the fundamental causes of poverty, and has been very successful in Madina Salaam.
Yeah, well, while we were there, we got to try a lot of really interesting fruit. Probably the least interesting of them was, it was called palm fruit. It was very interesting watching it get harvested. We got to see a kid climb all the way up this big tree, hack it down, and but there wasn't very much flesh on around the nut, and it was very stringy and didn't have much flavour. But then there was this stuff called papaya, and that was very nice actually. We all said that would make a nice soup. Yeah, I'd eat that again definitely. But the highlight had to be the cashew fruit. That was just unlike anything I think I've ever tasted before. It was sweet, it had this really sweet juice in it, it was incredibly juicy, but it had this flesh that was totally dry, and very bitter. So you had all sorts of textures and flavours going on in there all at once, but they're very, very, very nice fruit.
Alright, here goes.
This is why Sharon doesn't want to get on
Pretty good, pretty good.
Musa and Sharon acted as our guides and companions through the week and did all they could to ensure we got the most out of it.
You are feel free to come here and you are welcome. We love everyone down there and make sure you know Africa need help only. And a project like WYCE is very participating in terms of helping African people. We are proud of WYCE.
We will spread the word, definitely, yeah.
This is the village of Bruford, where many of the white people live.